here to the Suzanne Dwork Peck School of Social Work. Thank you so much to Dean Flynn, for being a visionary in terms of transformational social work and addressing social work in different ways. So again, I'm going to try and use this microphone because I don't like microphones, but I'm going to try my best to do this. So before I go to the slide, I can't tell y'all how excited I am to be here. Every time I get this opportunity to talk about sports social work, I just get tickled to death. I just get tickled to death. Because, I really can't explain to folks how this is, for me, this is a journey of about 20 years. About 20 years when I first saw a human interest story at the halftime of an NBA game, and it talked about, an athlete who overcame the substance abuse issues and the loss of his father to become not only an elite NBA athlete, but also a great father and a great husband. And so I just get tickled to death, and I'm so tickled that the room is full and that there are people out there that are watching from afar. This is very exciting to me. So let me go ahead before I begin. I haven't had my coffee, but if I seem a little bit excited, it's just because I'm very passionate about what I do. All right? So let me get started because this is an opportunity to see you. So first I'm going to define and I'm going to talk about what social work is all about and how social workers and social work students can utilize their skills in a variety of ways, some of those which Dean Flynn already mentioned. And then we're going to talk about some potential career options for social workers, not only in professional sports, but in college sports, in secondary sports, in high school and youth sports. Then a couple of strategies for alumni and students who might want to pursue a career, what their options are in terms of sports social work. And then lastly, I'm going to tell you about this small but powerful and emerging organization, sort of like, it's sort of like the reemergence of USC football, just on the scene again. We are going to make this thing happen. I'm going to tell you about this little organization called the National Alliance of Social Workers in Sports, where we're trying to do a lot of great things. So what is sports social work? Well, when we talk about sports social work, we're talking about promoting social justice and social change by focusing on the unique needs of athletes, not only at an individual, but at an environmental level. Okay? Now, I got to make sure that I want you to track this. We're not just talking about, the student athlete or the professional athlete, the high school, the youth athlete. We're not only talking about them, but we're talking about the person and the environment. So we're talking about their family. We're talking about their community. We're talking about their sport organization. We're talking about all of those things when we talk about social justice and social change when we talk about sports social work. But not only that, we look to promote the health and well-being of athletes through direct practice, through community organizing, through advocacy, policy development, education, and research. Yes, research. You can actually like research if it's related to sports. And we see some of the issues with regard to advocacy now with our professional athletes. Whether you like what Colin Kaepernick is doing or not, you have to appreciate the fact that not only Colin Kaepernick, but the Bennett brothers and others have stepped up and said, you know what? We're going to talk about prison reform. We're going to talk about police-involved shootings. These are the things that we think about and that we wanted to happen in the aftermath of the death of greats like Muhammad Ali. And so these are two aspects of what we call sports social work. And then lastly, back to a direct practice level, we look to enhance the capabilities of athletes to address their own behavioral health and psychosocial needs. One of my greatest supervisors, when I was getting my MSW, said one thing: I need you to focus on this. She said, you know what? If you've got the same 20 or 30 people on your caseload next year that you had on there this year, you're not doing your job. Your job is to move people off of your caseload. And so one of the things that we want to do is we want to enhance the capabilities of athletes, not only athletes, but their families, to address their posses, if you will, to address their own behavioral health and psychosocial needs. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of abbreviated timeline of sports social work. It started with, goes back to that social work history with James Adams and Hull House, acculturating immigrants into America, using sports like boxing to capitalize on helping them understand and cope and adapt in their transition into the United States. And yes, they were resistant to it, but once they saw the ability of sport to allow them to work with others from different backgrounds, ethnicities, etc., they began to adopt this idea of sport. And then we talk about midnight basketball. Now, some of y'all probably not in here old enough to remember midnight basketball. But midnight basketball was actually written into the anti-crime bill during the Reagan era. So money was funding midnight basketball. They said, you know what, if people are out playing basketball, they can't be out committing crime. And so then we go from 1986 to Greg Harden. Greg Harden was a student athlete who was recruited at the University of Michigan. He dropped out. He went to work in a rural section of Michigan, and the great Michigan coach, Bo Schembechler, said, you know what, he's doing great things for young people there. I'm going to bring him back to the University of Michigan. And Greg Harden, I consider to be the godfather of sports social work when he started working with the Michigan football team. Let me roll off some of these names for you, okay? All right? Desmond Howard said there would be no Heisman Trophy without Greg Harden, okay? Let me roll off another name for the ladies in the room. Tom Brady says that Greg Harden is one of the most important voices in his life. So we go from Greg Harden to Kristen Martin, who's at the University of Tennessee and has been there working with Team Excel as a licensed social worker since 2003. But there's where I had to take a step back, got into sports social work when I began to see pro sports and they began to develop these human interest stories and talk about not only the negative, but also the positive aspects of sport. University of Michigan School of Social Work started the Sport Social Work Association. And then I had an opportunity to start the Student Athlete Wellness Center at North Carolina Central University. And then I met this guy named Matt Moore, a professor at Ball State University. And I met another colleague, Dr. Ginger Gamelt, and we started the National Alliance of Social Workers in Sports. A couple of months ago, we had our first peer-reviewed special edition journal that focused on sports social work. 9 peer-reviewed articles, 3 research notes, 2 commentaries, all talking about social work and then you have organizations like the NFL Trust. How many people watch NFL on Sundays? How many people got the ticket? How many people got a favorite game? How many people have a significant other that they're tired of them watching football and talking about fantasy football and wearing jerseys? So sports, the NFL has affected just about everybody in this room, right? You feel me? You feel me? The NFL Trust employs 6 MSWs. 6 MSWs. So sports social work, the timeline is increasing. I focus, my positionality right now is the Director of Student Athlete Wellness and Personal Development at the University of Texas at Austin. And in my capacity, I work with student athletes. So for a minute, just so we can talk a little bit about, piggyback off of Dean Flynn's introduction and some things that Juan mentioned, vulnerability. We don't think about athletes as being vulnerable. Okay, the pro athletes, we're not thinking about them being vulnerable because you're riding around, you got the big rims, you got the nice rides, you got tennis shoes for days. How could you possibly be vulnerable? But that's what we see out in public. You're a student athlete. You get cost of attendance money. You get a full-time scholarship. You get priority registration. You also, have the opportunity to receive a free education. How could you possibly be vulnerable? But what we do know about student athletes is that almost 33% of them demonstrate or have said they demonstrate some type of depressive symptoms. 33% of 450,000 student athletes. That's almost 150,000 student athletes per year. 150,000 student athletes. Then we have 23%, another study, who said that they meet clinically relevant levels of depressive symptoms, meaning they could be diagnosed with depressive mental health disorder. The NCAA found that, and this is an old statistic actually, now it's not 22% of student athletes use marijuana, but it's almost up to 26%. And we know, according to the DSM now, that marijuana is a substance abuse disorder. We know the reasons, some of the reasons that young people use marijuana. Suicide, the fourth leading cause of death amongst NCAA student athletes. One of the most widely known and chronicled cases of suicide we've had two this year amongst student athletes. We had one last year, the Ohio State football player that they could not find for about a week. And then we know that 6.6% of our female student athletes showed symptoms of eating disorders. And so when we talk about vulnerabilities, we also have to talk about, domestic violence and dating violence amongst NCAA student athletes. How many people have ever heard the case of Yearly Love, the Virginia lacrosse player who died at the hands of her boyfriend, who was another student athlete? We have to talk about child sexual abuse. How many people heard about the Jerry Sandusky scandal at Penn State? Okay. Did you know that 4 social workers met with Sandusky in the years leading up to him being finally arrested and investigated? 4 social workers did not step in and intervene because of the allure of Penn State football. So when we talk about vulnerabilities, not only are we talking about the student athlete vulnerabilities, we're talking about males and females. We're talking about the kids who come to sports camps. Not to mention the fact that right now we have 120 student athletes at the University of Texas whose families have been impacted by Hurricane Harvey or Hurricane Irma, and they've got to go onto the field and perform. They have to go to class. And so these student athletes are vulnerable. So I really want to put you in the mindset that, whether you're a professional athlete and you've got money, or you're a student athlete and you're a full ride, there are vulnerabilities there. We've got homeless student athletes now. Okay? We've got student athletes who hail from foster care. Has anybody seen the documentary Last Chance U? Anybody see it? Okay. How many people read today that 2 of the kids that were featured in that documentary charged for homicide and a stabbing? Vulnerabilities. So I hope that I've put you in that space. I hope that you can sort of see how your skill set can help athletes, student athletes, their families, and the communities. Because now I want to talk about some different areas of work, and youth sports is where it happens. Now, Juan was very intentional in the fact that he said, you know what, don't you paint a rosy picture. Everybody not everybody. People like sports. People want to be involved in sports. I can't lie, y'all. I like my job. I like to go to University of Texas. I get to roll up in there, you know what I'm saying? I got my burnt orange on, you know what I'm saying? I sport my sneakers. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I know. You know what I'm saying? I understand. I know where I am. I know what's going to happen on Saturday. I already know. We all going to have a good time because sports is community building. So we all going to have a good time. So everybody wants to be a part of that, but the reality is you got to start somewhere. And youth sports provides a great opportunity for that. It's not only youth sports for organizations, but now I foresee youth sports and social workers being in place in school social work, okay? Whether you're a school social worker working as a coach, or you're a school social worker who takes advantage of being able to interact with your kids on the sports field, there's a place there. AAU. AAU is not just about basketball, but it's also about volleyball and other sports. So there's an opportunity to connect there. But not just that. How many people have been to a youth sport event, or you might be the one? You might be the one where you see the parent acting up. See the parent cutting the food. Now, it might be some of y'all. I know it used to be me until I got together. And so there's also an opportunity to work in terms of training parents and coaches with how to act and how to work with young people, just as Dean Flynn mentioned. So there are opportunities there. When we talk about secondary school sports, I just want to focus on one thing. It's not just about coaching high school sports and training high school athletes, but now what about working with entire systems? So not just a team or a school, but an entire school district. Now we see social workers working with entire school districts because school districts have athletic departments and athletic directors. So there's great opportunity there. But I have to be honest, many of the opportunities now exist in college sports. With respect to the National Alliance of Social Workers in Sports, we recently had a social worker hired at Louisiana State University, another hired at the University of Georgia, another is a tennis coach, assistant tennis coach at Butler. Okay? We know that we already have social workers working at the University of Michigan in athletics, Tennessee, Connecticut, North Carolina Central. Okay, so the opportunities exist there, and I'll tell you why. Because not only do you have an opportunity to go in and do some clinical work, but at the University of Texas, we have 3 MSWs working our academic support program. And so not only do you have an opportunity to impact them in terms of their academics, but then you're sitting down because remember now, you got to meet the person and the environment. So in order to help them with their academics, you got to understand that there may be some other things that are going on. So you have opportunities like clinical social work. You have opportunities like academic advisor. You have opportunities like my title, Director of Student Athlete Wellness and Personal Development. So there are a myriad of opportunities that exist on the college level. Now dig this. You don't have to work in athletics to work with athletes on a college level because our social worker with the Alliance who's working at the University of Georgia actually works with a local hospital. The University of Alabama football team alone contracts 4 social workers outside of athletics. University of Alabama. How many people been to the University of Alabama? Now, it's nice here. And just because I'm talking to all y'all, this is nicer than Alabama. But y'all got to go there and check it out. All right, leave it at that. So there are a lot of opportunities. I'm going to hit you with this before I move to pros. The athletic director at the University of Michigan, that has one of the largest athletic budgets in the country, the athletic director is an MSW. The former head of the Women's Professional Golf Tour was an MSW. The second in charge at the NBA at one time was an MSW. Okay? So the opportunities are limitless. And then we have professional sports. I know I'm talking a lot, and I know that I'm only supposed to be up at 30 minutes, so I'm going to start to move a little bit faster. And what I will say is that one of the things that we have noticed in professional sports is the opportunity for social workers to work in employee assistance programs. One of the members of the National Alliance, Mr. John O'Neill, has worked in Major League Baseball now for over a decade. I explained to you the opportunities with the trust. We have not seen that type of movement in the NBA. But what we do know about professional sports, and I want you to hear this, is that if you are a good social worker, a professional team will find you. They will find you. They will fly you in. They will pay you. They will make sure that you protect their investment. Because it happened with one of our members now who works with the Houston Texans. She did not have her eye on professional sports, but what had happened was she was just a good social worker. And so one of the things that I say when talk about career options for social workers in sports is that, you know, if you're a good social worker and you have aspirations to work in sports, be good at your craft. Those teams will find you, especially if you live in the same area. And now we have life after sports. And I think Dean Flynn again alluded to this. Look at the issue with NFL and concussions. Now you have assisted living programs that are being developed specifically for professional athletes. Okay, now dig this, stick with me, track me on this one. You got the concussion settlement, right? So they got money to pay for services, right? They need social workers because concussions bring about dementia depression, chronic pain, other issues. Social work. Okay. International, it's just happening. Folks in Canada are doing social work with athletes. I can say I know for sure in Canada. I just put that up there because I know Canada. I don't know too many other places, but I'm sure it's happening. I'm gonna keep it real with y'all. And then there's research. There's research. You know, the NFL gave the National Institute of Health or the National Institute of Mental Health $30 million. $30 million to look at research related to concussions and mental health. So not only is there a career option there, but there's an opportunity in terms of research. How am I doing on time? Good? Let's get back right, and this is important. And you might say, well, why he got up all them social work terms? Because we're talking about sports and social work. But one of the things that if this is an area that you're interested in that I really want you to know is that it's like any other type of social work that you want to do. Once you hone in on the area that you want to work on, you can be more effective in terms of marketing yourself. And that's so very important. It took me 10 years to really figure out what my skill set was, what I could do. I can build rapport with athletes. I know how to do programming. I know how to work in and out of systems. I need to be in a mesosystem area in terms of my social work. And you need to do the same. Like I said, it's not just about the microsystem and athletes and coaches and teammates. Maybe that's your thing, and that's great. That's a crowded area. Because you got, as it was alluded to, you got sports psychologists that you have to work with. You have licensed professional counselors who are occupying that space. Not that you can't, but it's crowded. But then when you get up to the mesosystem and the exosystem, especially with regard to the organizational policy piece and the working with other mental health professionals in terms of building the team, it's not as crowded. And that's a great opportunity. You know, everybody's got turf issues. You know, this is my athlete. This is my team. No, you can't work with them. 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 And everybody, you know, fighting over the athlete. But there's certain spaces where if you can work as a team or you're working on policies that are related to the team or related to the sport, then you can be valuable. Remember that time in the Ray Rice incident where the NFL put together that team of individuals to address domestic violence? Now, regrettably, I didn't hear about a social worker being in there, but it would have been great. And that's an instance where leagues are moving in that area. When we talk about things like baseball and players, and James and I talked about this, coming from places like the Dominican Republic and trying to get them to adapt to life in the States, that's a place where we can work. And lastly, the macro system. And that's just really, you know, looking at the broader implications of sport. One of the reasons that I really enjoy sports is because the first football game at Rutgers University back in the late 1900s was really designed for one purpose, to bring communities together. And individuals who can work in that macro system and understand the broader sport culture and how sport can be so valuable, whether it's kickball, whether it's adult kickball, whether it's a co-ed league, oh man. That's when we see the intersection between social work, sport, and things like urban planning, because you're looking at it in the broader context, spaces for sport, planning for sport, etc. So I really want you to think about that. If you're thinking about going into this area, it's not necessarily where you want to be that you might be able to start. You may have to start here to get here. You may have to start here to get there, but you really have to understand it because, you know, as Juan and I discussed, this is a difficult business to get into now. I can't imagine how difficult it is to get in social work and entertainment, but I would think that it's probably equally as difficult as sport is because it is a challenge. You have to understand, not only do you have people who are trying to protect assets, but you got athletes who are like, what do you really want from me? What do you really want? You know, you've got former athletes who go into the business, you know, and they're still dealing with some of this. So there's a lot going on. So it's a very closed system. You know, I went over to your Department of Athletics here, and I couldn't get in one door. I'm like, man, y'all ain't even going to let me in. What's going on? going to tell you something. At the University of Texas, our volleyball courts are below my office. You know what? To get in there, they have one of the hand fingerprint scanners. I put my finger up there just to see if I get in. Though didn't even move. I was like, you're not coming in. Really protected. So you have to have an idea of where you want to go and what you want to do. I'm going to roll through these very quickly. I'm going to put them up there, and I'm going to roll through them so that we can get James up here, and he can tell you all about all the wonderful things that he is doing with the Dodgers. First of all, you got to really, right now, there is no program where you can go and learn about sports social work, except for one. I'll tell you about that later. Okay? And I'm hoping that another emerges soon. Hint, hint. All right? So what you can do is look at the media stories. Media stories are the way that I came into the business. I paid attention to them. Because, you see, they might do a story on Chris Henry, who suffered from depression, ended up jumping out of the back of a vehicle, but then they would go interview social workers about his condition. Pay attention to the credible media stories. Have an enterprising spirit. You got to get out there. You have to think. No one's going to give you this. It's not going to be like anything you've ever done before. So you're going to have an enterprising spirit. You're going to have some creative hustle. You might have to volunteer, okay? You might have to go through some games and you might have to go and work in some sports for which you know nothing about and don't really care about. You're going to have some creative hustle. It's just like the entertainment industry. To get in the entertainment industry, you got to go out and hang out at parties, and not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it does take a lot of energy and a lot of money, okay? Volunteer, specialized coursework, self-assessment, and that was the slide that I referred to earlier. Now, this slide is important. Let me speak to the alumni. Alumni, it can't happen. It can't happen. Wherever you're at now, if you want to go into sports social work, it can happen. But you got one or two ways that you can do it. You can either drop everything you're doing and go volunteer and start reading some media stories and enterprising spirit, or you can think about starting to craft your practice in a way that's attractive to support team, whether it's a private practice and you do direct practice, or whether you do some organizational work. It can be done, okay? For students, right now is the time. In your classes, whether it's social policy or research or human behavior in the environment, whatever it is, whatever papers you have, do them on sports social work. Look and seek out opportunities for field placements. And again, it might not be direct practice. It might be community organizing. It might be organizing leagues. It might be working with coaches. Whatever it is, seek out those opportunities. But here's the thing that's important to both of you. Now, I need you to hear this. I need you to tune in. For all y'all out there who tuning in over the webinar, I need y'all to listen to this. This is the thing that I need for you to hear. At every opportunity you have to explain to someone what sports social work is, explain it to them. Okay, I'm a very spiritual man, so I spread the gospel about church, and I'm saying enough about that. I feel the same way about sports social work. Because what it does is it allows you to better understand what it is. It allows you to demonstrate your passion. It allows you to have someone walk up to someone else and say, you know what somebody else told me the other day? They told me about sports social work. Oh, yeah? What's that about? And then they go tell somebody, and they tell somebody, and they tell somebody else. But the more you talk about it, the more people will come at you and say, they're not vulnerable, and then you have reasons why. They'll say, well, they don't need sports social workers there, and then you know and you tell them why, and it helps you. And so one of the things I want to say to you is anytime you have the opportunity to explain it, explain it. I'm going to go on to the last slide before I hit this one. Get in the loop. Get in the loop. I'll put some names up there like Greg Harden, Barbara Hanson, Kristen at the University of Tennessee, Lauren Mordecai at UConn. Get in the loop. Get to know these folks. Get to know the John O'Neills of the world. Be in the loop and be in the know. These are my last two slides. The National Alliance of Social Workers in Sports. We want to promote individual and community well-being through partnerships between the profession of social work and the field of athletics. Our vision is to lead to the integration of social work practice into all realms of sport with the goals of individual and community well-being. And we've accomplished I think in a lot of ways our first step, although it's continuing, that's defining athletes as a vulnerable population who need social workers to engage team, assess plan, and intervene in their lives. I'm going to go through this very quickly, and this really is my last slide. All right, Zia. Founded in 2016. We're just a little bit over a year old. But right now we have 131 members. Y'all, can y'all say that with me? 131 members. I love it. I'm going to tell you why I love it. Because that was about community organization and building. Every time I would meet someone from our organization, you know what they say to me? I didn't know there were people out there who did this. And I said to them, and I say, you know what? I used to think that too. It's like going to Mars and finding life on Mars. I'm serious. We were just so happy to know one another. And so it's about community building. We will have our 3rd annual Sports Social Work Symposium in Dallas, Texas, where we have the chief medical officer from the NCAA, Dr. Brian Hayline, coming to speak at our conference. Dean Flynn, you remember she said that the NCAA has a mental health toolkit? One of our members helped put together that toolkit. The NCAA came to us and asked us to endorse that toolkit. And this is all because of the great work of our 131 members. We have youth, college, and professional sports committees, and in 2018 of January, we will kick off our sports certificate program, online program, which will end with a field placement, a virtual field placement for the people who've gone through the curriculum. Not only that, but we're doing advocacy on the youth, college, and high school level. We've consulted with some of the major conferences and hopefully some professional conferences soon. We're conducting research and applying for grants. And we have a website where we have blogs, job announcements, webinar, and listserv. We have professional membership as well as student membership. So as I close, that was my last slide. I'm done, I promise. But here's what I want to say. I hadn't even had my coffee tonight. So y'all can imagine if I had some coffee, how I come out here. And this is not an act. I love what I do. And what I want to encourage you, whether you're alumni or student, and if you're interested in sport and you're passionate about it, make it happen, make it pop. I mean, I get up every day, and besides my hour-and-a-half commute to work, which I hear is the norm around here, I love my job. I pick up my coffee in the morning around 8:30 or 9 a.m., and by the time I finish drinking it at 6, it's time to go home, and the day has flown by because I get to do things like create groups for injured athletes, create a transition program for our athletes, create a substance use prevention program where we have peer educators. I get to work with trainers. I get to work with faculty. I get to work with sports medicine. I get to work with sports psychologists. I get to wear this gear to the game, y'all. And although what's going to happen on Saturday is very uncertain, very uncertain, I absolutely adore the student athletes that I work with because for real, they got 2 full-time jobs. And I love their parents because they come from miles around to support them. And I think that what life is all about is that we find our passion and we find what we love to do. And if you actually enjoy sport and you enjoy social work and you enjoy helping people, this is something that you need to check out. And then in a few years, you'll be up here standing all excited and happy about what you do, although I'm sure that you're excited and happy to do the social work that you do. So I want to thank you so much for your attention and your time, and I look forward to hearing James and answering any questions later. Peace.